Hi, I'm Suzanne Ehlers, and this is Not Really Strangers, the podcast where we explore just how connected the refugee experience is to our everyday lives and to the social issues that matter most to us. Thanks for joining us for another conversation with a brand new guest, here to share the story of how they came to realize that their story and the refugee story were intertwined. By the end of this episode, you'll see that in this global community, the distance between us is often much shorter than we think. Let's dive in. Ada, I am so happy to see you. Our listeners are only hearing you. I'm getting to see your beautiful face. So we're going to start with a softball, which is, where are you calling in from today?
I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington, which is the ancestral lands of the Duwamish people, where it's gray and also gorgeous. Usually I have a background of Wakanda from Black Panther because I'm always there too. And somehow I
Oh,
am always where I need to be. So yeah, that's where I am.
didn't you have a Black Panther business card for a while?
I still do. I still do.
I have that somewhere, literally. I have that somewhere in my wallet that you must have given me now. It's been at least 7 or 8
Oh,
years.
yeah.
Yeah, well, beautiful place. So the second question is not where you're calling from, but it's where do you consider home? And maybe it's the same, maybe it's not, but tell us a little bit about what home is for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question I sit with a lot, honestly. So, Seattle is where I have spent a lot of my time. My youngest kid was born here. My oldest kid was born in New York City. And my roots, I think, are deepest wherever I build community. And, I've also lived and worked in places that left, you know, really marks on me. I was in Southeast Asia after the tsunami, across sub Saharan Africa. I lived in London for a while. So there's a part of me that considers home to be any place where I've been asked to bear witness to something true and deep. So, in a lot of ways, I think home is less geography and more of a quality of presence.
Yeah, that answer matches what a number of guests have said, right? That it's not a fixed place. It's a place where community can be built, where work has been done, as you say, and sort of bearing witness in some of those places. Um, so you've named some places like Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, and maybe that's part of this story. Tell us a little bit about how the issue of refugees and of forced displacement first became something you were interested in or working on or engaged with in any respect? Just kind of where's the origin story for you?
Yeah. And I love that you said origin story because I obviously am a huge sci-fi and Marvel DC fan. So I think it comes in a very, as any story, circuitous way around. I was actually a foreign exchange student in Greece when I was 17. So you can imagine, as a Black girl who grew up in Los Angeles, I certainly thought I knew, poverty and struggle, but I saw a different kind there. I also saw, I think for me, there's a connection in I think the world's sort of a shared forced migration story. So I wanted to learn more. I think as I think about that, in my undergrad, lived and worked in a refugee camp in Nepal. So it was another place. It was, I think, well, how I got to that was really like there's a quite fantastic hippie granola crunchy college in Vermont that I went to. It was called the School for International Training. And that's kind of what hooked me for life. What I what I fundamentally understood then and I know now is that I was drawn to the idea of my ancestors being forced into leaving a home or a place that was not their own into slavery. And it's a connection that I feel deeply rooted in my work to bridge culture and connection. But then later, I was working in international development and I got an opportunity to work in South and Southeast Asia in the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami as an emergency program manager with Save the Children UK. And that proved to me a lot more about our shared connections. I met a driver in Aceh, Indonesia. And, we were working together. And when I first met him, he looked deep into my eyes and he was like, I am so sorry for your people. I was shocked. I was shocked. And I said, what do you mean? I mean, he had just lost everything, like 16 members of his like immediate and close family. And he said, for New Orleans, what happened to your people? Well, like, I mean, that just broke me, right? Like, how could he from across the world understand and see a connection in what happened in Hurricane Katrina? And of course, I have family there. And so it was really difficult. But that kind of compassion across oceans was just really heavy and deep. And, working alongside families who had lost not just their homes and livelihoods, but people, children. I think what struck me was how hard these families were working to reconstitute some sense of normalcy and to insist on their own humanity in conditions that were designed to completely reduce them. Right. So that that kind of that always is the through line for me. First, my connection to my ancestors and that idea around forced migration, and then the compassion and understanding of that connection. So I will say it started when I was 17. And then that understanding grew, and then it's gone across my career ever since. From there, I moved into displacement work with Refugees International across sub Saharan Africa, South Asia, in conflict zones, and then into policy advocacy at the Women's Refugee Commission, where I had the extraordinary experience of helping facilitate women, peace, and security resolutions at the UN Security Council. Where I first came into contact with USA for UNHCR. So, but each of those chapters, I think, deepened my understanding of how forced displacement is never just a humanitarian crisis. It's a political crisis, it's a gender crisis, it's a climate crisis, it's a systems failure. And once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting. I don't know if we've had a chance on any episode of the podcast to shout out some of our kind of peers in the space, and you've worked at two of them. So, Refugees International, we'll put it in the show notes, an incredible group that does incredible work, different than you for you, but in a shared sort of space with us. And the Women's Refugee Commission as well. One of my best friends from long ago is working there now. So, yeah, just to sort of lift up a little bit, you know how I feel about like there is enough to go around and there are so many groups working in such close concert and collaboration on these issues that I think it behooves us to kind of lift and boost, to bring kind of increased attention to the issue that we're all working on from different vantage points. I want to just pull one thread. I think that's really, well, maybe two threads. One is, and maybe it's just to sort of say it again so that our listeners really sit with it, this idea of shared forced migration and that connection you've made to your ancestors, to sort of humanity's ancestors. And then I think about this idea of systems that are designed to reduce, and even in times of conflict and trauma and crisis, we still have systems that aren't set up to like lift and alleviate, right? Like, so either one or both of those, do you want to pull on just a little bit? Because I know so much of your work, even since the names that you've mentioned in terms of organizations, has been at that nexus.
I think when I think about the points of intersection around systems, and the fact that I'm now working in philanthropy, um, I think what comes to mind is the intersection of a couple of different things, right? So, and I would say power, because systems, people having power over systems is part of how we get at transformation, right? So what comes to mind for me most immediately is that intersection of displacement, gender, and climate. Actually, when we talk about refugees, the image that gets centered often is a man, right? Like a young man. But the majority of people, as you know, living in protracted displacement are women and children, right? And the specific vulnerabilities that they face: sexual violence, reproductive health and crisis, exclusion from formal decision making about their own future, right? And the chronic underfunding in humanitarian response. So I think centering the intersection of these things and is how we can change that system, right? So I think I could also link it to like what I'm doing now and what I've done most recently, which is, building an initiative around women and girls of color, which is grounded in an analysis of intersecting structural vulnerabilities, economic, racial, geographic. That work actually has something in common globally because it's impossible to ignore some of the major things that are happening that have to do with systems that we don't think about, right? Such as the climate, which is a compounding variable, right? The communities that are most disinvested from across every dimension of structural inequality are precisely the communities that are most exposed to climate risk. And we're seeing this now: heat, flooding, food insecurity, and displacement. So they all kind of come together. And that's where all, I think, the worlds collide. And the sector, I think the philanthropic sector, has the flexibility that aid doesn't, right? It can take risks, it can fund locally led organizations, it can support feminist movements inside displacement communities, but it hasn't, right? And I think part of our work is making that case loudly and specifically to funders who have that capacity. And I think there's another piece in there, which is around power. And I will say that again, for the people in the back, fund locally led organizations, support feminist movements inside displaced and refugee camps. So I want to just put that there. There's another piece here, which is about narrative, right? So we all run on stories, and who gets portrayed as worthy, who is a worthy recipient, whose suffering gets made legible, and who doesn't. I spent a lot of my time thinking about how those narratives get constructed and who gets to construct them. So refugees and displaced people are so rarely the authors of their own
Mm,
stories.
yeah.
And so I think that is part of a systemic issue. If they're not the authors, if they're not the ones who have the power to make decisions of their own agency, it's a power question, and it's one that we can actually do something about. So I think I'm trying to make the link between like these systems and who has the power to change these systems and where we could actually make a difference in that area.
Mhm. That was beautiful. And in fact, the next question I have for you is go a little bit further in this philanthropic direction. There's so much work you've been doing at this sort of this area of finance, of making capital available, of making grants, both for famous and big foundations and small and unknown, maybe family foundations and others. What's most exciting for you right now about philanthropy, in addition to what you just said, which is that it's got the flexibility to respond if it knows how to and wants to? What else is happening in philanthropy right now that's good stuff?
Because a lot of philanthropy is organized around charity, around reducing suffering at the margins while leaving the structures and systems that produce suffering intact. I'm interested in something different. I want to work with, people, funders, and institutions who are asking what would it look like to fundamentally, shift power, to put resources behind the people that are closest to the problem, who already have the solution analysis and the relationships that just need the capital, all kinds of capital. So, in my previous role, I was able to direct, hundreds of millions of dollars in grant making, including an initiative that I mentioned about around women and girls of color. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we didn't design a strategy in a room. We built a mechanism called the Women and Girls of Color Design Council, where women of color with lived experience and technical expertise built the strategy itself. So that is what I would say a liberation practice looks like. Not just funding change, but changing who gets to define what change is, particularly for those who are in the worst situations in conflict and natural disasters that have the least agency, get to design an investment strategy that is for and by them. I think that's the innovation, is if we can allow those with the least power to have agency. And that could be in the form of these kinds of design councils. Community foundations have been doing this. Governments have something called participatory budget making. So it's not uncommon that you could do this in impact investing. You could do this in private philanthropy. You could do this in humanitarian aid spaces. So I think there's a real opportunity here for us to think differently, to operate differently, and the result is transformational, right? And that requires a shift in thinking, right, and a release of control, right? My friend Glenn Galick just wrote a book called Control, how big giving can shift their ways of giving. So I think there's a lot out there to look towards in order to do this, but it's going to take some doing.
So many examples are coming into my mind of things I've witnessed that match what you've just laid out. Like, and I would love to keep pulling that thread and bring it back maybe to this issue of refugees and forced displacement. And you already did that a little bit, but let's think about some of the ways in which you've described the potential for philanthropy to be liberatory and the way that we can dismantle systems that are designed to reduce and oppress. How would you draw some connections between that, what you're doing, and what you know about the humanitarian space? Is it what you said? Is it really just putting money and decision making power into communities who are on the front lines of disaster? Like, what are some other ways that this refugee space that you've inhabited for a long time, how can we leverage some of the learning and innovation you're doing now in the philanthropic space?
Well, when I was working in this space, there were some, interesting gains made at that time. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but things like in South Sudan in camps, there were there was just the idea that listening to women and their issues of gathering firewood and being raped on the way to gather firewood, putting the water closer, having, ways of making sure that their safety was paramount, right? So that was actually making sure that refugee women or displaced women had a seat at the table when designing where the camps were going to go, right? Same with understanding in refugee camps in Guinea with Liberian and Sierra Leonean refugees that there needed to be, lights on the way to uh, go to the bathroom. And so integrating the voices of women and children and not designing camps just for men, right? So those types of things are
Yeah.
small things that we could do, which now I hope are regularly done. But it is going to take these large institutions and agencies of humanitarian aid um, to integrate this idea of local expertise and local knowledge. But not just that, like it is about what I mentioned before: fund locally led organizations to support them in their own communities. Part of the problem is that humanitarian aid is a still a colonial top down power structure that does not take into account what is happening locally. And so I think it is always going to be about agency. It is always going to be about integrating the local knowledge, the local expertise, and shifting power at that level. And there's actually a great organization. There's a great fund right now called the Resilio Fund, run by Fatima Toure, who is currently, experimenting with that idea. So philanthropy can do this and is trying, but I think it's that whole system and institution that sometimes hold us back because institutions are just things, they're behemoths, but there are people behind that. And so I think in changing institutions means changing people within them.
Yeah, I think there are probably many places in the world where you would see the progress that you would hope for in some places, right? The provision of solar lights to make sure that areas stay well lit and safe, the placement of water disbursement within camps. I mean, I was in Bangladesh at the end of last year and bore witness to a woman living in a shelter with a door that had a hinge for the first time in her entire displacement crisis. Like, I mean, a hinge on a door that she could close and have privacy and some semblance of safety was like life changing for her. And I agree with you. I'm working, of course, for the UN Refugee Agency, but we're clear that nothing gets done at the camp level without the support and input of local partners and local expertise. They make the trains run. So I appreciate, and of course, I know Fanta over at Resilio Fund, and am so interested in sort of what they're pioneering in this space as well. So thank you for raising, some of the more innovative work I think that's bubbling in a moment that frankly feels kind of scary as aid funding is decreasing, but crises are increasing. Where's it all going to come from? And you've pointed us in the direction of some possible sort of solutions and bright spots.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, so thank you for that because I do believe that obviously there's been a lot of advancement and I think it's also then that next step, right? That next step. So we can do a lot of these great solutions at the local level and then that next step is what is the transformational move, right? That gets us out of these small steps, right? They're small steps and they're great. What is the transformational next move, right? Then it becomes like, are we being intersectional, right? Are we connecting these things together? Climate, gender, are we funding and moving to the level that we need to be to actually enact that transformation? Because what we actually ultimately want to do, right, is not have to do this anymore, right? We don't want to be in this position. So, are we being intersectional? Are we also, doing the political analysis? Like, I appreciate that there's been advancement, right, in the way that we are providing services and funding. But the power issue is always going to be there. The power dynamic is always going to be there. What are we doing to advance that at a really transformational level?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean there's so much food for thought here. It's like a core you're giving us like a mini master class if you will in transformative philanthropy. And I hope what listeners are taking away though is that there is, even in a time that feels so chaotic and even in a time when so many funding streams have been decreased or sort of dissolved altogether, I want the listener to appreciate that there is still so much experimentation and invention and innovation happening in philanthropy and in the relationship that good philanthropy is forging with local groups, with local expertise, with groups that are looking to bust up sort of systems of power that are designed to not put, those most impacted in the driver's seat. I think it's important for us to remember that this work is happening and that we can be a part of it as we learn more about it. So shifting just a little bit, back to the name of the podcast, Not Really Strangers. And I want to know what the idea of stranger means to you.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, right now, stranger feels like one of the most politically loaded words in the English language. I think we're living through a moment where strangeness, otherness, foreignness is being weaponized. And so I think where entire populations are being made to feel like strangers in countries that they built, right? Communities that they've called home for generations. And yet I've also experienced, radical hospitality that exists on the other side of that. I've walked into communities in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of like conflict as a complete outsider, and I've been fed, I've been sheltered, I've been trusted with stories. And there's a human impulse, I think, towards connection that is older and more stubborn than the fear that's being cultivated right now. And I hold on to that. The stranger in so many traditions is also the sacred guest. And I think we need to reclaim that. And there are so many instances that I can tell you of being in the Middle East and or being in the middle of Afghanistan and having people just completely bring me in, gather me in. And as somebody who, has also felt like a stranger in my own country, I hold on to that.
I love that notion of radical hospitality, and I also appreciate, I mean, even the story you told at the beginning of the individual in the face of the tsunami asking you about New Orleans. I mean, here's a stranger who, like, with one question becomes like a compassionate ally in your life and bearing witness to what your people have gone through, and he's in the midst of tragedy. Like that, I'm just so interested in how easy it is to bridge the difference and to bridge the gap that frankly is made out to be much bigger and more treacherous than it really is. I think you've broken that down so beautifully for us. And I love the title of the podcast because we're not really, right? There's so much that runs common through us. And it's just yeah, it's our job to break through it and to bridge and to really try to find areas of commonality in a moment of such fracture.
And one more thing about that is that last week I was in South Africa, and right outside of Johannesburg, I got to go to the caves where they found the first peoples, and just it's called the Cradle of Humanity, and just the name of it, right? Like where we were all born, where we all come from in the whole world. It just really, really brought it home for me.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the name of this podcast and the fact that you asked me about that idea of what is being a stranger, what does it mean to me at this moment in the world? Being able to see that, being able to like be in the caves where these first people were born, our actual humanity was birthed from this place, was just it's very meaningful.
Yeah, and it links back to where you started us thinking about our collective shared migration and the story of ancestors. Like, if anybody was listening and didn't think that was about them, they were wrong, right? Like, it is all this shared, unifying story. So let's take all of those people. Let's take this question of humanity and let's put everybody around a dinner table. I love to like end on this question, and you can take it in any direction that you want. You can tell me what you'd like to serve. You can tell me about the people at that table. Like, what is that in this moment of breaking bread is like a way to, bring people together? How would you what do you wanna do at that dinner party? What story could we tell?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is a great question. Um, well, first of all, the table has to be really, really long. Um, like a big we have a place in Washington State called the Grove of the Patriarchs, and it's these massive trees that are 1,000 years old. So it has to be one of those. And we have to eat something like Ethiopian or Nepali or Indian food, the kind that you eat on a shared platter because the act of eating from a shared platter with your hands, it's already doing the work of the evening, right? Because you all have to like dig in. Um, and there has to be jollof rice because there will obviously be a huge debate, loving debate about who's the best, what country has the best jollof rice, right? So there's going to be a huge hot, heated debate about that. And then, like, I think when we get to the dessert part, there's probably going to be a big debate about like what's the best dessert. But my best dessert is mango sticky rice because, in homage
Ugh,
to the years that I spent in Southeast Asia. And then if I think about who's at the table, uh, Wangari Maathai, because I want to understand how she held her joy while she was doing impossible work. I would love to talk to her about that.
mhm.
James Baldwin, because every dinner party needs somebody who will say the thing that makes everybody go quiet for a moment. And I think Toni Morrison for that same reason, because she just knows how to say the thing, and everybody's like, whoop. And then I think my mom, because she makes any gathering a full blown party. I think also a group of women that I met in a displacement camp in Angola, who I think about a lot because they were just coming out of 25 years of civil war. And I met them right when they were coming out of the bush. Um, oh my gosh. And Prince would be the musical guest, of course, because we're going to have to dance.
I love it. I love it, of course.
Yeah, yeah, that would be it. And then, of course, I would want my
That's
kids there
perfect.
because I would want them to hear every word, right? Like just so that they could soak it all up.
I love where you've taken us today. I love the conversation about new modes of capital and philanthropic investment. I love that you have a history in this space of refugees and forced displacement, but that your career has taken you to so many other places so that you're able to kind of reflect back to those of us, like all the different ways that we can walk through this door and make change. And it's been an honor to speak with you, and I'm just grateful for your time.
Oh, Suzanne, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and it's just been so great to connect with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening. Your time is valuable, and it means a lot that you've chosen to spend it here. You can find today's show notes, including how to connect with today's guest, at unrefugees.org/notreallystrangers. That's UNREFUGEES.org/notreallystrangers. While you're there, I hope you'll consider making a donation to the organization I lead, USA for UNHCR, to help us provide more support for refugees here in the US and around the world. If this episode was impactful, please take a moment to review the show and share the episode with a friend or family member. This small action will help us have a much bigger impact. Thanks so much. Don't be a stranger.